Hi, this is Dan from HR. If you don't know me, I suggest you check out my welcome video, but I'm an HR business partner with almost 20 years of experience building workforce models for companies such as WebMD, Electronic Arts, and Spotify. I've resigned from corporate America and now dedicate my time making content and providing information to how corporations really work. In this episode, I want to talk about one of the most frequent mistakes candidates make while they're at an interview. Whether or not it's a phone screen, a Zoom interview, or an in-person meeting, almost all interviews will follow this exact same cycle, and it can be broken down into these phases. It starts with the introductions and establishing rapport. Then they walk through the agenda, and then the interviewer begins to ask questions, leading to deeper questions. Following that, they'll hand over the interview to you for you to ask questions, and then they conclude the interview by advising you what to expect next. One of the biggest mistakes that candidates make is right after that introduction phase and before it goes into the information gathering phase. After the initial greeting, most hiring managers or interviewers will start with a question. So tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume. This is an informal signal that the interview has formally begun. In most cases, the candidate answers by doing just that, and they will literally talk through their resume. They list their places of work as though giving a history report of each role, how long they were there, and when they left. While you do this, you'll see that the interviewer is just nodding their head and smiling. But in reality, they've likely started to disengage because they have your resume right in front of them. All you're doing is giving them a checklist of things to compare against. When I speak with managers or recruiters who experience this, they say that they sometimes have to force themselves to stay engaged. The interview has started on a tone similar to a school report, sometimes leading to low engagement, boredom, and forcing the topics to remain shallow, as in you're just giving a list. A much more effective strategy is to use this time to actually set the stage and help drive the conversation. Talk about how you grew and developed and in what areas you're passionate about and your biggest achievements. Also use this time to proactively answer any of the questions your interviewer may need to know. This gives a much better first impression, as well as lets the interview get into more deeper and productive topics, leading to a much higher engagement from the interviewer. Let me give you an example of both to help you understand how to frame this question into a much better opportunity. I'll use myself as an example. Here's how I would answer the question in the standard format. It's factually correct, and it gives the interviewer a chance to mark off my resume, as I mention each of the companies, my titles, how long I worked, and then when I left. But it's static. It's boring. After I'm done explaining all of this, the interviewer is going to need to go back and ask individual questions for each point, keeping us in the shallow question and topic territory. By contrast, look at this instead. This version tells my story. It connects the dots for the interviewer and presents my overall career in human resources. It gives me the chance to introduce topics and strategies that I was proud of doing that'll open up topics of conversations later. It shows the exposure I received in different job fields and industries. And when I'm done with this version, the interviewer has a much clearer picture of me, and we can immediately dive into a number of topics based on what I've shared. This is essentially what's called an elevator pitch. This is a phrase salespeople use in order to help them focus on their key messages they want to deliver if their client was with them for the short span of an elevator ride. Try to practice reframing your career list into a career story instead, and you'll start to see a big change in the qualities of your interview. Once you've mastered this technique, there's a way to uplevel even further. It can be very effective, but it will take a little practice. If you're meeting with a hiring manager for a role, it's very likely you can do it. There's no doubt your abilities or skills or experience, and the purpose of the interview is to instead see if you can do the role for that specific company and add value into whatever the company's experiencing. One of the best ways to do that is to use the Tell Me About Yourself section in order to start building a bridge between you and the interviewer. If you can send subtle cues that tie your experience with the role, it will build a huge level of credibility. For example, several months ago I was contacted by TikTok to interview for a senior HRBP role. I spent some time researching and learned that TikTok was going through a large growth phase in the market. They were also considered a new advertising platform to Gen Z, and there was some controversy around potential censorship of some of the content. When the hiring manager asked me the walk me through your resume question, I kept referring to those three topics lightly within my experience. I mentioned how I was the HR partner for marketing at EA when we were building targeted advertising to different age groups, and that when I was with Spotify and managing a sudden increase of headcount, as well as dealing with the culture of privacy and censorship concerns. I could tell this had the effect I wanted. I could see that the hiring manager's face was engaged, and she was nodding, and a few times she stopped me and said, "Wow, this is so great. A lot of this is what's happening here at TikTok." This allowed the rest of the conversation to go much deeper and more effective into my experience and skills, instead of wasting precious time giving introduction information. This is not a very easy tactic to do, but if you do want to stand out in an interview, it's one of the most effective ways to do it. Find out what's happening in the company you're interviewing for, find out what the team is going through and what's happening within the industry, and then use your experience to tie into those and use the Tell Me About Yourself question as a way to introduce it. So, a few reminders from today's video. Remember to not just walk through your resume. Use the time to talk about your career story, your biggest achievements, and your growth areas. Proactively provide data so your interviewer doesn't have to ask. And finally, connect your experience subtly with the role. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to check out the others, follow me on social media, I'm especially active on TikTok, and let me know what topics and questions you'd like me to cover, and if you happen to like this animated style. Thanks!